Hi there, this is a recap of John Wick, the first movie. So, in the beginning of the movie, we see where John is grieving his wife. His wife has just died. He's really down, and we see him remembering the good times. Anyway, shortly after that, we see where he gets a delivery. And the delivery is a gift from his wife, and it's a little puppy. The little puppy is so adorable. So with this gift, it's got sentimental value for him because it's the last thing from his wife, and it starts to cheer him up a little bit. Now, prior to getting this delivery, we see where he was at this gas station. Two guys were pumping gas next to him, and it seemed like they were trying to jack his car or something. There was some encounter with the two guys, but one of the guys is the son of a guy that he used to be in business with, Viggo, and this guy Viggo, his son's name is Iosef. So it was Iosef and another guy. And so he kind of shooed them off and they took off. But only for them to come back later. And they attacked him in his house. And of course, during that encounter and that whole fight scene, they ended up taking their grievances out on the dog. And so he lost the dog. We see where he's really solemn and he's burying the dog in the back. And I think it was in his backyard, and it was such a sad scene because he was just starting to have somebody where he's not alone after his wife died, little companion, and now this is taken away from him. So we see later that he is asking a buddy, I think that was Watson, he was asking to find the son, and so they thought he was out of the life for good, and they were just surprised to see that he's back. But, he's really not back in the life per se. He's wanting vengeance for them, what they had done to him. At one point, we see where he went to this hotel, and it seemed that this was a place that he used to stay when he was back in the life. And the front desk guy is familiar with him. He kind of remembers him, and they had a little exchange. And so he gets a room. Now, when he first enters this hotel, we see where he sees this lady. Her name is Perkins. So, kind of said, hey. And they didn't seem to be enemies. And I had the thought that maybe she was going to be the one to work with John Wick. But that wasn't the case. So later on, while he is there, he got attacked by this lady who he had met walked by in the lobby. Now, prior to this happening, we see Viggo having this encounter with his son because he finds out that this has happened, and he called his son in and basically kind of whooped his butt a little bit, like, you idiot, do you know who this is? This is John Wick. And so his son felt like he was doing something to impress his dad, but what he had done is bringing down pretty much a you-know-what storm on him. So he decides to go on the offensive, and he sends a bunch of guys to John Wick's house, and there's a whole showdown at his house. Jesus, it seemed like almost 30 guys. So there's a whole carnage in his place. And shortly towards the end of the fight scene, we see where the police showed up and coming there for, regards to a noise complaint. While he gets to the door, he's putting his gun, in his waist behind his back, and we see carnage everywhere behind him. So after that happened, he really decides, like, you know what? After this attack, okay, I'm back in the life then. If this is what you guys want, now you got it. So we see where he goes in the basement with this massive, what do you call that? Like an axe, kind of. And he breaks up the cement and brings out his gear from his old life. So we know he really, really means business. Now, this is prior to him going to the hotel and the showdown. Now, later on, we see where after he's at the hotel, we see where he's watching across the street. And one of the guys, the other guy from the gas station, we see him outside going into this place. It looks like a club, but they have a bathhouse in the basement. And so this is where Iosef was. And after this whole showdown, after he realized that his son had messed with John Wick, he has protection on him. So he has tons of bodyguards. So firstly, John encounters the other guy, and he got what's coming to him. Then he went to the basement, and of course, he couldn't really get directly to Iosef, but we see where he sees him, and just like the coward that he is, when his men are not around, he's running and scurrying like a little roach. So there's a huge fight scene with all the bodyguards, and it's like so many. It was just amazing because there's so many ways that he's shooting and fighting. Shooting on the floor. You see where he's shooting guys through the railing of this balcony. There's hand-to-hand combat. We see one scene that looks almost like WWE, where he's like got this guy up and just slams him down. I was like, ooh, this gotta hurt. So after this all happens, or while this is going on, Iosef runs out. He's in his towel because he was kind of in the basement in like what looks like a pool, but in the bathhouse part. And so when he runs outside, well, as he's running through the place, he's telling them like, oh, John Wick's here. So of course the bodyguards are like going, for him. And so he runs out. So when he gets to the street, one of the guys are out there. And so he got a ride. He took off. And so this whole fight scene happens in there. So later on in the movie, we see where John Wick is captured. He got captured, and so we see his before he got captured, after the scene with the girl in his room, he got attacked by this girl. They come in, there's a massive fight scene there, like he's in his boxers fighting for his dear life. So he subdues the lady, and this guy comes in and asks, is everything okay? I think his name was Harry. So he asked Harry if he wants to make a few extra bucks. So he's like, is this a catch and release or whatever? That's what they call it. So he's supposed to watch over this girl. So before he leaves, the girl, he asks where Iosef was, and she tells him about this place in Little Russia. It's a Catholic church, and so Viggo has a vault there. So he decides he's going to go there. It looks like a typical church. He walks in, and this guy, he's supposed to be a priest, or, he's like, oh, my son, how can I help you? You could help, all right. He had a bullet to his leg. And so there's other guys in there. There's a showdown in there. Anyway, it seemed like the church was a front for some business operation, because there's a huge vault that he found, and he just ruins everything. There's tons and tons of money in there. He sets the whole thing on fire. So when he got captured after that, Viggo's like, do you know what you've done? You've ruined all the leverage that I had on the city, all my recordings, all this stuff. He was ticked. So he wanted to kill him. And so when he left for, I guess, the guys to finish him off or something like that, John Wick, of course, got to the guys and fought his way out of there. So we see where, he's asking, we see where Viggo asked this guy to kill John Wick, because so far his attempts haven't been successful. So this guy's name is Marcus, and he's saying, I want you to kill him. I know you guys are close, so you can get it done. And so Marcus is like, yeah, sure, I'll take care of it. And I was like, no, not the friend betraying him like this. So anyway, it turns out that wasn't really the case per se. But later on, after he escapes, he found Iosef, because he was in some safe house somewhere with a bunch of guards. John Wick took them down and got to the son. The son's running away like the coward that he is, and he took him down. So after that happens, now Viggo's really ticked off, and John Wick's like, okay, I got my revenge. We see where he meets up with Marcus, because Marcus was helping, kind of helping him, even though he had this contract. Now I was like, okay, good. He wasn't being betrayed. So when they parted ways, they met in like an, I guess, a isolated location. Looks like, and so he said his goodbye or whatever, and they're parting ways. But we see where they're being watched by Perkins, because Perkins had gotten away when Barry was watching her, and she had overpowered him. And so she got away. And so she tracked them down. And of course, she ran back to Viggo to tell what was happening. So as Marcus was leaving, we see where guys, surrounded him, and he had to go into this building, all his weapons, and put all his stuff down. So he knew what time it was that they had found out what was going on. So he got captured by Viggo's man. And of course, sadly, they kind of took him out. And so after that happens, Viggo's like, okay, I got it done. And they decide they're going to take off. They got the chopper ready. They're headed to, the heliopad. And after that happened, we see where Watson, I think the guy was, one of his colleagues, said, hey, you didn't hear it from me, but a certain person is heading to a certain helipad, and so he got the hint of who it was. So he was on his way there, caught up with the guy. And so Viggo's in the vehicle with his men, and of course they see John Wick's coming. And he's like, gosh, I knew he wouldn't stop coming. And so, one of I think his main guy was like, does anybody have a gun? Does anybody have a gun? And he's just, I just couldn't believe that he didn't have a gun. So he's like panicking, and Viggo's there like, it's almost like he's in shock. He's just there grinning, and he was just not, his reaction was just not appropriate. He must have been in shock, like, oh my gosh, I'm so close to getting away. This guy is back. So after the whole thing happens, John got rid of one of the vehicles. He rammed it and it fell over, and it felt like a huge depth over on the other side. So there's one vehicle left that has Viggo, his main guy, and somebody in it. So we see where he's just circling them like sharks, and every time he comes around, somebody's getting killed. He's ramming the vehicle, there's shootouts and all that stuff. So after all this, we realize that Viggo has a gun. I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? Is he trying to get killed or what? He was like, oh, here. So he's handing it to the guy. He's pulling it back, pulling it back. Like, what kind of game is this? So anyway, he says something to him in Russian. He's like, speak English. And he tells him good luck. So, of course, he comes out and he wants to battle John Wick. He ended up losing that battle. And anyway, so while he is busy occupied, Viggo gets to the wheel of the vehicle and runs into his vehicle. And, of course, we have this whole fight scene. So now is the time now after everybody's, out the way. And John Wick has the drop on him. He's like, oh, well, no bullets. Let's, man to man or something like that. And we're professionals. Let's act why can't we act civilized or something like that? So now it's back to hand combat now. And of course, he is a little trickster. Of course, he wasn't going to be fair. He wasn't going to play fair. He whips out a knife. And so I was like, my God, am I seeing this correctly? Because when he came at John Wick, it's almost like John Wick pushed the knife in his own stomach. I was like, what the hell? Why is he helping him? But I think that was a ploy to get the knife from him. I don't know. But let me know if I'm misinterpreting this scene, because I was like, why is he doing that? But anyway, when he stabbed him, he ended up getting the knife, and he ended up getting, I guess, a better hit on him, and so he ended up taking down Viggo. So after that happens, we see where he's dragging and crawling away, and he slowly made it to this building, and he was able to find some antiseptic. From what it looks like, it's like a veterinarian's office, because he got some medicine to get his wounds, and then he used a staple to try to staple up himself. And so while he's there, we see where there's a bunch of dogs. So that's how we knew it was like a veterinarian's office. And so he's there, the dogs are yipping, and I thought that he was going to find a dog similar to the one that he got from his wife, but no, he went for this pit bull. And so he lets him out, and then we see at the end of the movie, he's hobbling down the street, and basically the pit bull is walking him because he's still hurt and injured. And so that's how the movie ends. And so this is my first time watching. I love a good action movie, and I definitely enjoyed this one. I don't condone violence, but those action scenes or fight scenes, I was like here for it. Hopefully the next two will be just as good. But anyway, I would recommend, if you haven't seen this one, to check it out. If you love action, yeah, it's here plentiful.